Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Around the Nest as we J-Talk our way through the Toronto Blue Jays organization. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, joined by the voice of the Toronto Blue Jays minor league system as we go along, and we'll talk from Ben Wagner in Triple-A to Tom Gauthier in Double-A, Tyler Murray and Al Hernandez in High A Dunedin, and then with Trey Wilson, who joins me on the airwaves with the Lansing Lugnuts. Let's begin this week with Triple-A and Ben Wagner. Ben, how are you?
Doing wonderful.
Well, let's start with a question. We partnered up this week with Bluebird Banter, and they've been holding question threads both last week and this week, and one of their best questions that they asked, one thing that I'd love to start off with, was what was your impression of your very first home crowd of the season, with the way that your season has begun at home?
Dealing directly with the crowd, if I understood it correctly, right, Jesse?
Sure, that home atmosphere.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've been spoiled the last couple of years to open up in Buffalo with great, not only weather, but great attendance. Opening day in Western New York is somewhat of a rite of passage for many generations. So we're always excited to get that day here. The fans are excited to have it arrive, more so this season as well, because we had 4.5 inches of snow on our field prior to 4 days out from opening day. So everybody's relieved to see the sun and green grass at the same time. 11,000 in the ballpark, which until just 2 nights ago was the largest attended minor league game this season. So that was a nice feather in the cap for not only the Buffalo Bisons, but also the players to play in front of a great crowd like that. And we saw this even last year with great crowds from Southern Ontario and across Western New York coming to the ballpark. They provided a great energy and understood that Buffalo, once again, will have a very deep pitching staff and a very good lineup, and they were treated not only to that coming to fruition with Marcus Stroman's Triple-A debut, 4 runs in the first inning. That got everybody onto the edge of their seats and had the energy high, and we just rode the wave through 9 innings.
Let me ask, as we're going to speak about all sorts of different players, but you mentioned all of the snow that has been on the field. Have you had a good conversation with your head groundskeeper, Chad Laurie, about what it's taken in order to make that field playable for baseball at the very start of the year?
Yes, we've had many of conversations, and Chad is a very good friend of mine. And he did a lot of praying at the same time of work. But, Buffalo does not have a very large groundskeeping staff. There's Chad, his assistant, Jeremy Atkins, and a couple of guys that will come in if needed on an hourly rate. So the crew of fluctuation, those 2 guys, and maybe an extra 3 assistants coming in at limited time, from a 9 to 5 standpoint, that's it. And it took a lot of hard work and a lot of long hours to get the field in the shape that it was for opening day. And the Bisons left for 5 days, and it's as pristine as it's ever going to be right now for early part in the season. And Mother Nature is going to take care of the rest when she puts a little sunshine on it this weekend and really warms the temperatures up.
As far as the play on the field, Buffalo began the season looking good. Maybe a couple of defeats recently, but Jay Happ taking the mound, a strong performance yesterday. What have you seen out of your team in the early going?
Living up to the billing in terms of pitching, and it'll be nice once all the starters are allowed to get past that 80 pitch mark after their first couple of times in the rotation, Marcus Stroman included, and even tonight's starter in Kyle Drabek. And the back end of the bullpen did take a hit when you lose Neil Wagner, whose stuff will translate to the big league level and already has with 2 scoreless innings. That's been the most impressive part. These guys came out, did not miss a beat, and off to a 4-0 start to the year, which was great, and having to deal with 2 postponements right off the bat, the first being in Rochester and then the first day when we were in town in Lehigh Valley. But also, we can't rest on this offense attack either. Guys that are off to some slow starts, like Kevin Pillar, for example, have kind of been hidden because the Bisons are still able to produce runs. Every night out, you can book it that the Bisons are going to get an opportunity to score 4 or 5 runs. You do that along with the pitching staff, Gary Allenson feels very confident about the number of wins that this team can build on.
Juan Francisco, notably to me, just taking a quick glance on the stats not too long ago, last year we were talking about all the sluggers that Buffalo had in its lineup, and they've reloaded this season. But Dan Johnson's been terrific.
Dan Johnson's a guy that hit 30 home runs 3 seasons ago in this league, and then you have Juan Francisco last year hit 18 major league home runs, and they're playing on the corners tonight in Buffalo. That's some pretty good leadership when it comes to some pop, playing on both corners and playing good defense, plus what they can muster in that number 3, number 4 slot in the batting order. That is some serious pop, and I thought we had pop last year, guys like Luis Jimenez and company. So Buffalo has, a great opportunity to produce some power. And then you've got the guys that can get on the base path and turn and burn, like Anthony Gose, Chris Getz, for example. And you cannot ever forget about Matt Tuiasosopo, who was a late addition to the projected roster, but when he was designated for assignment, quickly accepted to come back to Buffalo. He's a guy that has potential to get you 15 long balls. Andy LaRoche, while his role is not quite defined yet, he was an everyday player last year. He was good for a dozen home runs. So there's no shortage of power in Buffalo right now.
We're speaking with Ben Wagner, the voice of the Buffalo Bisons, AAA affiliate for the Toronto Blue Jays. From SB Nation's Bluebird Banter, a question about Anthony Gose, wondering how his approach at the plate differs this season from last season.
Well, that's a question I posed to him and manager Gary Allenson in preparation for our broadcast today. And the product of Gose and the number of walks that he's had is actually more indicative of the caliber of pitching that he's seen. The good news is he's not diving after stuff that he's being baited after, but he's also being patient enough. If it's not a strike, he's not going to try to jump on it. But the one thing Gary Allenson said, he needs to cool off the ambush mentality, being a leadoff man. And not Pilar, but Gose has done that a couple of times. And 4 out of the 5 games he referenced that Anthony has started, there's been at least one at-bat in each where he's tried to jump on the first pitch. May not come away with a base hit, may not make it out, may foul it off, what have you. He said to be a leadoff man or a true leadoff man and utilize that speed, you need to take away some of that mentality of I'm going to go up there and hack at the first pitch, regardless if it's in the wheelhouse or not. So there is a little bit different of an approach that we've seen from Anthony. We did not see that aggressiveness a lot of the time last year from Anthony. And in terms of the ambush, that's how Gary Allenson coined the phrase earlier today. But we didn't see the walks either this early in the season for Anthony Gose. So it's about having the quality at bats to make sure he's on base and stay aggressive when he's on the base paths and hopefully making the right decisions when he's on the base paths as well.
From the base paths to the pitcher's mound, a question about Ricky Romero. Aside from cutting down the walks, how much consistency does the front office need to see from him? Is it a 5-start sample size, or is even more needed to understand if Ricky's back yet?
I'm thinking you're going to need a big body of work from Ricky in terms of making sure that he's all ready and mechanically sound to go up. But also, not only the mechanics side of it, making sure he's ready to deal with the mental adversity that unfolds over the course of a given game. We called it Chucky last year in Buffalo, and it was a term coined by Josh Tolley because all of a sudden, the nice kid in the corner turns into Chucky, and then everything goes awry. That's kind of how the season went last year. With Ricky would piece together 2 or 3 solid innings, and all of a sudden the 4th inning would totally unravel. Maybe a bleeder gets through, maybe there's a walk, it hits bat or whatever. All of a sudden, 3 runs come across, and that would be the demise of his night because the pitch count would get elevated. I think for the Toronto organization to build on Ricky Romero and get him back on the roster to bring him, to the big leagues again, you're going to have to see a pretty good half of baseball here at the start. And that's not to say if he has a good half and all of a sudden you get around June or July and he pieces together 2 or 3 solid outings, timing is everything. And if Ricky is the best pitcher and it's his opportunity and they have a need, he'll likely get that call.
We love having Ben Wagner join us with the 4-2 Buffalo Bisons. They're playing tonight at Coca-Cola Field with Kyle Drabeck on the mound. Our question of the week that I'll let everybody know beforehand, just what are you looking most forward to this season, Ben?
That is a great question. And I thought about it when I saw it in the email earlier this week. I have to approach it this year in terms of player development, and not only with who is in Buffalo right now, but also who's kind of in the wings waiting to come to Buffalo. And when you see and got to witness as well, if you were in spring training at the right time, Aaron Sanchez throw, and what we were able to see on on the computer as well, watching him throw in spring training games, and then hearing and talking to scouts too, what they rave about him. I look for the promotion of Aaron Sanchez, hopefully to Buffalo in the near future, but also the fact that Marcus Stroman has some growing to do as well. And when you can see that maturation on the mound, and in terms of his command, taking him a step further in his player development, those are a couple of guys that I'm specifically looking forward to. But you have to enjoy the whole ride here, and I can't wait for the storylines to continue to develop throughout the course of the season, and that's what's fun to bring it on the air, night in and night out.
Those are the insights of Ben Wagner. You can find the Buffalo Bisons, bisons.com. He just mentioned whom he's looking forward to, and we're going to bring in Tom Gauthier next. But first, Ben, thank you very much. Until next week.
All right, sounds great, Jesse. Good luck, Tom.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Here's Tom Gauthier. Tom,
one and only in time, in person, and everything this week, Jesse. I do apologize for my malfunction last week. It was game 2, and we still haven't gotten back in that Friday routine yet.
Hey, no worries at all. All right, Ben's looking forward to seeing Aaron Sanchez. You've got Aaron Sanchez. How are things so far?
Sanchez has been as advertised. I don't think he was as sharp in his last outing as he would want to be. A colder night when we were in Reading, Pennsylvania, but for the most part, he's been electric. We saw him in Trenton around 90 to 92, and I said it was the second inning or so. We're saying, it's early on in the season, early on in the game. I said, by the time he gets heated up, maybe the 4th or 5th, we may see a few pitches hit 98. 2 pitches later, he's at 98, and then he was 96 to 98 the rest of the game. So he's a fun guy to watch. He works. I really don't think we've seen the dominant Aaron Sanchez yet that they saw in spring training, the one that Buck Martinez said should be in Toronto right now. But the one we've seen has been pretty good.
We're joined by Tom Gauthier with the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. A question for you, Tom, from SB Nation's Bluebird Banter's minor leaguer, wondering about how Yusuf Carter, the nephew of Joe Carter, was doing. He was starting behind the plate for a couple of games after A.J. Jimenez's injury.
Yeah, actually, Aaron Munoz has seen the bulk of the time since A.J. Jimenez went down. Munoz just because he's caught a little bit more recently. But Carter he's number one, he's a super nice guy. Could not be a nicer guy. He's a bit of an older guy. You can kind of tell that he has a little more maturity about him. Not that other guys don't, but you can tell that he's been around the bush. He realizes that, what he is and the opportunity that he has, but just a real nice guy. And then behind the plate, Bobby Meacham talked to him 2 nights ago. He caught on Wednesday in our final game of the road trip. It was the first game that he actually caught. He was a DH for the other time that he was in the game. And Bobby said, he goes, hey, I thought he did really well. He goes, I actually thought he looked pretty good. We hadn't seen him a lot in spring training because he had a thigh problem. He got hit off the thigh with a foul ball, so it limited his at-bats to DH and first base. But he goes, I definitely thought that he played pretty well and thought he looked pretty good. And as a result, he's actually back in the lineup tonight after Munoz got the call yesterday. I still think that's an area where this team will need to get shored up if A.J. Jimenez is gone for a long time, but they don't expect it to be all that long because it's a hamstring and it was a minor one at that.
This is our first time having you on the show. Last week was the first week, but now we actually get to speak with you about your Double-A Fisher Cats. How does the roster look? What excites you most about this team?
I think it was going to be offensively, Jesse, to be honest with you. I thought that the offense was going to be one that didn't take long to pick up from where it left off last year. A lot of returning guys, Ryan Schimpf, Brad Glenn, Gabe Jacobo, Andy Burns, Kevin Nolan coming back. I mean, those are 5 everyday players when they were healthy that we had last year. Brad Glenn has lived up to the billing. He's hitting .357. He's been on base in every game with a base hit. Kevin Nolan, a bit of a slow start, but he's actually shown a little more patience this year. Last year, I remember one game in particular, 5 at-bats, he saw 6 pitches. The first 4, he swung at the first pitch and was retired on him. So, that's a nice difference. Ryan Schimpf is at a home run. Andy Burns is at a slow start. And then Gabe Jacobo has really not done anything much at all. He's had 1 hit in some 20-odd at-bats right now, so he's really struggling at this point to begin the year. But the guy that's been most enjoyable to watch, I think, has been John Berti. He's one of those scrapper second baseman types. He's an everyday second baseman type of player, but he's one of those scrappy guys. He's not the biggest tool guy, biggest tool shed, so to speak, but he is quick. He's already stolen 6 bases, including 2 more last night, and that type of speed, we have a few guys that have the ability to steal some bases. We're gonna run a lot in this league, and we're gonna run a lot over this league, I should say, when the guys get on base.
we loved having John Berti in Lansing because, A, he was a Michigander, so his entire family was there. His brother, as a matter of fact, worked in the Lansing Lugnuts box office. So
how about that?
The Bertis pitched in every way they could. They were wonderful. His defense stood him out above the pack, and so it's so much fun to see how well his offense and his base running is going, too.
Yeah, and it's funny because he's a fearless guy. He's an older guy. He's not an older guy, but he's a college guy, 4-year college guy. And you can just tell he has that base running instinct about him because he's been stealing against lefties. Jesse Biddle, one of the Phillies' top prospects, he stole 3 bases against him, and he's a lefty on Tuesday night it was. And then he stole 2 more bases last night against Darren Gorski of Binghamton, who's a lefty. And he's had no problem, and they haven't really been all that close. So he gets good jumps. He knows when to go. And you combine him with hitting coach John Nunnally, who can read a pitcher like a book that easily. It's kind of like a child's play for those guys over there at first base.
I have a challenge for you. You mentioned Aaron Munoz. Aaron was one of my favorite guys, terrific to talk to. But as soon as you started to interview him, the conversation changed and it became very cliche. You can see what you can do, but one of the brightest guys and one of the nicest guys you could ever meet, and he knows his baseball.
Well, Jesse, I will say that if somebody with your intelligence and interview skills can't do it, then I have zero opportunity to be able to do that down here in Double-A. So let's get that up there right now. Don't expect a whole lot when it comes to that.
This is Tom Gauthier, the voice of the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. Let me ask you, we asked Ben Wagner with Buffalo about this. How is it to prepare your field for opening day?
Our guys worked really hard at it. We had a lot of snow. We actually had a day in the middle of March. It was one of the first warm days where they said, all right, guys, let's come outside. Everybody's going to spend their lunch. We'll buy everybody pizza. We'll walk around the outfield for an hour. We'll really make a lot of, progress breaking up some of that snow. And it was like walking on an ice skating rink. You could not do anything with it. We had shovels. We had baseball bats. We were out there with everything but jackhammers trying to just get through that first 2 inches of ice on the top of the field. Once you got under that, you had snow, but then you had another 2 or 3 inches of ice underneath that. So it was kind of a nice sandwich. But those guys were out here every day. We put a lot of black sand on the outfield, which basically just radiates heat from the sun and is able to melt through that very quickly. They had it uncovered the entire way by the time we left on the road trip, but we actually couldn't work out during our first couple of days in New Hampshire before we left on the road on the field because it was still too wet. The infield was still frozen in places. When we left, it was still frozen on the mounds and on the infield. So by the time they probably spent 16 hours a day on it, they got it ready to go, and it looked great for last night. Grass wasn't green yet, but as Ben mentioned, a lot of sun this weekend. Temps in the 70s will take care of a lot of that.
It's just been crazy. Everyone was saying that this winter was unlike any that they had seen before. It was colder. It was longer. There was more ice. There was more snow when you thought you were done with it. And yet here we are, all playing baseball again. And I don't know about you, but things are warming up very nicely in Lansing.
Well, we had 60s yesterday. It was going to be 68 for a high today. It was beautiful out in the afternoon. A little overcast, a few sprinkles right now. Tomorrow is going to be the coldest day of the next 3 days, and it's going to be a high of 68. We're 72 and sunny on Sunday, and then 78, pushing 80 on Monday.
That was beautifully delivered, too. You might have a second career whenever you want it.
It's funny because in a past life, I actually did weather forecasts for a private contractor that somebody just hired him from different radio stations across the country, and we just sat in a radio booth for hours on end and just did forecasts from everywhere to Omaha to the Pacific Northwest to Minnesota to Florida.
I am unsurprised. Tom Gauthier with the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. Here, promote this coming weekend in New Hampshire.
Well, we actually have a couple of big days. Bob Littman, our fellow radio broadcaster, he's looking forward to tomorrow. It's Superhero Day, so we'll have that. And then it's going to be a Storybook Character Day. That'll be on Sunday. So it should be a pretty good weekend here. And, again, when you get weather like this in April, it's just money in the bank because we're going to have good crowds with our Reading Challenge kids that are coming in. Thousands of kids that completed the Reading Challenge, some 4,000 or 5,000 ticket redemptions for this weekend through one of our sponsors. So we'll have that, and then when it's sunny out, 2 years ago we had a day like this when we had almost 8,000 people. So it'll be a good weekend, and then we're home through Wednesday with a day game, and then finally a chance to catch our breath when the team goes back on the road.
NHFisherCats.com is the website for the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. He's Tom Gauthier. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you.
Absolutely. Let's go right down the ladder now. Let's go to A-Adv, the Florida State League, and the voice of the people, Tyler Murray. How are you?
Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, even if I was in a bad mood 10 seconds ago, talking with you has improved it drastically. Great to be back on Around the Nest.
I honestly think that we should have Tom Gauthier deliver the weather reports for every team in the system. I would love it.
Oh, yeah, that sounded quite nice. I still haven't been up there to New Hampshire. Well, I'm from New England, but I wasn't able to make the trip a few hours west. But the more and more I hear about it, the more and more I'm tempted to skip some games this year and get up there.
Northeast Delta Dental Stadium, and it's easy for the weather to keep folks away from the ballpark. Not for you, not in Florida, but in New Hampshire or in Buffalo, and yet the crowds have just been terrific for the Bisons and the Fisher Cats. And meanwhile, you there with the DJs, your crowds are seeing a fantastic team that has not trailed in any game this year with the exception of, walk-off loss. So not a bad start to the year, sir.
Well, obviously, it's been a lot of fun to watch. This team seems to have a good formula at this point. No starting pitcher has allowed more than 2 earned runs in a single start. We've seen Matt Buoyed twice, Taylor Cole twice. We'll see Jesse Hernandez for the first time tonight. Jay Half made a rehab start. And Ben White made his debut yesterday in Dunedin, pitched very well. So we're pretty much the Blue Jays in terms of 1 through 5 in the rotation. There's no one you can really overlook in terms of opponents coming in and thinking it'll be an easy game. I didn't even mention Daniel Norris, who's going to pitch tomorrow. And tonight, it's going to be Hernandez's first outing. So the pitching is there, and the offense, who scored a season-high 12 runs on 18 hits last night, it is right behind us.
Got to get more specific with that starting pitching. Question sent in from Bluebird Banter, and everyone's just wondering about this starting rotation that you have, beginning with Matt Buoyed and the results that Matt has seen. How sharp has he looked? What is working for him?
Oh, he's been tremendous this year. The big lefty has a deceptive windup, and he starts hitters off the first time through the order with those fastballs, and then he's got 3 different off-speed pitches to get swings and misses, which he does very often. Then the second time through, he's shown the ability to throw with breaking stuff for strikes to get ahead. So he's always mixing things up. He's always deceptive. 2-0 so far. He's thrown 12 scoreless innings with just 8 hits and 1 walk allowed to start things off. And we always talk about it on the air. We mentioned it last week. The fact that he played so long at Oregon State really gives him an advantage, I think anyway, against a lot of the younger players here in the Florida State League. They might be the same age, but in terms of professional experience at a competitive level, like the Pac-12, which Matt Buoyed played in for quite some time, he definitely has the upper hand. And he's kept hitters off the board for quite some time, a 190 opponent's batting average. And I think last year, what did he go, maybe 20 innings without allowing a run, Jesse, if I remember correctly? Maybe not that much, but I'm sure you remember the number.
He was exceptional for the Lugnuts, and he was making it look easy. It was a pitcher pitching at a level that, quite frankly, it was a great way to get his feet wet, but it was clear to us that he was ready to pitch in Dunedin. With the Lugnuts, 14 scoreless innings, only allowed 7 hits, 1 walk, 12 strikeouts, and he finished things off with 10 innings with you, and in the first 4 he wasn't scored on. So his first 18 innings and his first however many appearances were all blank last year before getting scored on in the Florida State League, and apparently he doesn't want to get scored on in the FSL any longer.
Yeah, he's been quite impressive, and we talked with Taylor Cole yesterday, and Matt Buoyed was the opening night starter, and Cole said, way to set the tone, 7 shutout innings, and Cole came out and did almost as well. 5 2/3, just 1 earned run allowed, and it really hasn't stopped yet in terms of how effective the Blue Jays starters have been, and the bullpen to this point, through 7 games, has allowed just 3 total earned runs, and 2 of them came off a home run 2 nights ago from one of the Cubs' best hitters, Dan Vogelbach. So without that one mistake, that'd be just 1 earned run allowed from the Blue Jays' pen. Really up and down Daryl Knowles' staff. There aren't many holes at all here in Dunedin.
Back to Taylor Cole. His strikeout stuff is working. 7 Ks his first outing, 9 the last time. Is it getting swings and misses on one pitch, or is it everything?
It's mostly the changeup and the slider, actually, Jesse. At first time through the Cubs order, when he got 5 straight strikeouts a couple of nights ago in Game 2 of a doubleheader sweep, it was mostly swings and misses on the changeup, which looks awfully similar to his fastball. That's the way it works. You know how it goes. But the second time through, it was the slider. So instead of swinging at pitches that looked straight but dropped out, it was on swings and misses at straight-looking pitches that moved off to the side, out of the strike zone. So 2 different very good out pitches that Cole has developed, and he says he's been working on that this past offseason to not just have one go-to pitch, but to be more of a complete pitcher. and he's just another big-time strike thrower the Blue Jays have, and that's where it all starts. I mean, overall, the walks that have been issued from this team, a minuscule, just 12 total walks in 7 games, and a good majority of those walks has come from the bullpen. Taylor Cole only 3 so far himself. Jay Happ only had 1. Ben White only had 1, and just 1 from Matt Boyd. As far as Daniel Norris goes, he hasn't walked anybody yet, so starting rotation knows how to find the strike zone.
Looking in from afar, and you always wonder how things will translate from year to year, league to league. But the Lugnuts had an untouchable closer last year in Eric Sekula, and so far it's more of the same with Dunedin. The untouchable closer the year before was Danny Barnes. It's good to see Danny back and healthy. So far, it looks like his command. Well, what was that?
No, it really is nice to see Danny Barnes back, but please continue.
That you have Kramer Champlin, who flummoxed batters here last year with all sorts of breaking stuff, and it's so pleasant to see Efrain Nieves, and you can go right down the list. It's more of the same. They're all seeing the same sorts of success now with your DJ.
Yeah, I won't lie. There was maybe a bit of a concern when guys like Tony Davis and Scott Gracie, John Anderson, all got well-deserved promotions either during last year or at the end of last year, but the guys from Lansing have stepped right in and taken care of business. Kramer Champlin has only allowed 1 base runner in his 2 outings so far. He's been tremendous, and we'll get a well-deserved start, I think, on Sunday. So we'll see if he can recreate some of that Lansing magic he had last year in that wonderful 7-inning performance I know you remember from last year. Nieves is a great left-hander out of the bullpen. Jurado as well. 2 very deceptive deliveries from southpaws, but I definitely do want to talk about Eric Sekula. He doesn't just paint the corners of the strike zone. He pounds the corners of the strike zone. Good hard stuff, and for whatever reason, opposing hitters just have no interest in pulling the trigger on first or even second pitch swings. So from there, he almost always seems to be ahead, and he can get a ton of strikeouts. So far, he's faced 9 hitters in 3 innings, so obviously he's been perfect, and he's punched out 5 of those 9 batters. So Sekula, you really can't ask for a better performance out of him so far. 2 saves and 3 games finished, and the Blue Jays have won all the games, of course, in which he's pitched. We asked Darryl Knowles, the pitching coach, who the team kind of tapped it as the go-to closer to start the season with last year's closer Blake McFarland on staff. He also had Danny Barnes, who has a single-season Blue Jays saves record with 34, but they seemed adamant about giving it to Sekula, so clearly he impressed the organization with what he did last year for the Lugnuts.
He has to be happy that he's not in the Orioles organization. I've heard word the Orioles do not allow their minor leaguers to throw cut fastballs, and Eric Sekula discovered the cutter. He and Ian Kadish both last year, maybe a little bit before that, and that cut fastball that he utilizes, along with his normal fastball and his hammer curve, my gosh, I can't blame an opposing batter for getting a little frozen.
No doubt about it, and he pretty easily handled a relatively potent Cubs lineup twice in a row. Clearwater, the Phillies affiliate who we played a couple of days ago, really had no chance, and it's almost already getting to the point where opposing teams only have 8 innings to score runs as long as the Blue Jays can stay ahead late. And even you can shorten the game even further when you look at their 7th, 8th, or even earlier 6th inning guys if a particular pitcher can't go that deep. There's just so many options out of the bullpen. And it's almost a great problem to have for Knowlesy and Omar Malavea, the new manager this year. Who do they go to out of the bullpen? Right now it's just been getting everybody their work. It's not a strategic go-to guy just yet. Of course, Sekula gets the ninth, but in terms of who fills in the blanks, they've literally thrown every other guy out there in order of who's pitched the least recently, and they all get the job done. It's mind-blowing.
There's nothing to complain about. All right, next man up, getting out. This is Tyler Murray. He's the voice of the Dunedin Blue Jays. Just a pleasure to work our way down the system from Ben in Buffalo, Tom in New Hampshire, Tyler in Dunedin. You can hear the fun that we're all having. The question of the week for every broadcaster, Tyler Murray, is what have you most been looking forward to this year, or what are you looking forward to the very most this season?
Well, at first it was to see who got the closing job. We got 3 guys who were competing for it, but now it seems to be Eric Sekula most definitely. And overall with this lineup, it's all about seeing how the chemistry of some Dunedin veterans, I'll say with air quotes, with Marcus Connect, Matt Newman, Casey Hobson, and Derek Chung really solidifying the middle of the lineup with a couple of new guys atop the lineup. John Berti's in Double-A. he always set the table last year, and that's a big reason why he got promoted. But the question this year was, could Dwight Smith Jr. and Dalton Pompey in the 1-2 slot get on base enough for Newman, Connect, and Hobson to knock him in? And the answer is obviously yes so far. If you looked at any box score, Dwight Smith Jr. leads the Florida State League with 9 runs scored. Dalton Pompey is second in the FSL with 4 steals in 4 tries in just 7 games. And that's helped Casey Hobson to a league-high 11 runs batted in. So I was looking forward to seeing, and I still am, of course, as the season goes on. But the big question was how the lineup would work in terms of replacing John Berti, because they had a great opportunity with those returning middle-of-the-lineup guys, and they really haven't missed a beat. They've even improved a little bit in that regard, so it's been a lot of fun so far.
This is Tyler Murray, the voice of the Dunedin Blue Jays. Tyler, here's a question for you. Do you want to stay on the air? We're bringing in Trey Wilson, who joins me on Lansing Lugnuts broadcasts. Do you have a moment to ask any questions that you might have about the Lugnuts?
Oh, I know how it works, Jesse, but thank you for the lead-in. Yeah, Trey, first of all, welcome to the Lugnuts. It was fun listening to you every once in a while last year in Bluefield, but I'm sure you're having a great time with Jesse. I think what myself and a lot of different Blue Jays broadcasters and fans are wondering about is that prospects crew you guys have there. Let me think. Dowell Lugo, DJ Davis, Mitch Ney, and Matt Dean. I'm sure I'm missing a couple, but out of those 4 guys whose names always jump out at me in the box score in terms of being ranked in the top 10 in Baseball America's prospect list, who have you been most impressed with so far to this point in the year?
Well, first of all, thank you for the welcome. It's awesome to get to stay in the Blue Jays organization this year. That was definitely something that I was taking strong consideration in while I was looking to go elsewhere for this season. But I would have to say Mitch Ney, even going back to last year, watching him make his debut with Bluefield, Mitch is a guy to keep an eye on. He's so far beyond his years already. His swing is fantastic, and his ability to hit when he needs to hit, where he needs to hit the ball, do what he needs to do to drive in runs. Mitch has been absolutely stellar going back to last year, and he's rolled that right into this season. Matt Dean, the guy can hit. I mean, where did that come from last year? There's a lot of that I think that have changed with his swing and with his approach at the plate. He's hitting 370 right now. We're still earlier in this year, but 370 right now, and that's after starting out in a bit of a slump. So we'll see if that holds up. I'm sure he'll be about a 315, 320 guy in this league if he can keep up with the way that he's going. Lugo's bat's slowed down a little bit to start the season, but it's starting to wake up. He still has a lot to work on defensively. He's kind of he looks a little awkward at shortstop, but the tools are there if he wants to stay at shortstop or if the organization wants to keep him at shortstop. I think the tools are there, and there's a lot to build off of with Dowell Lugo.
Sounds like an exciting roster, and I guess there was a little bit of envy when I looked at your guys' team this year in terms of how many prospects there were. And not a red-hot start, I guess, obviously in a good position to make a move as the season goes along. What do you think, if anything, is holding the team back right now from big-time success?
Starting pitching has been a little bit shaky so far to start the year. I think that's been the biggest thing. And the bullpen at the back end has surrendered some runs, which is a little bit surprising, a little bit uncharacteristic of what the guys have done prior to heading up to this level. But it's early, as you know. We're a week in, and things are going to continue to grow for all of these guys. The starting pitching ERA so far this year, though, is hovering right around. Actually, now it dropped down under 6 after last night, down to 5.18 after these guys gave up 4 unearned runs. Gauthier had a great bounce-back start after he got knocked around a little bit at Lake County over the weekend. But the starting pitching, I've been very surprised. I don't think it's anything that's going to sustain with guys like Tom Robson and Alberto Tirado having short outings. And Jairo Labort's made 2 appearances. He's walked 4 in each one of those, which ties his career high twice. I think that all those guys are going to kind of range things. They're going to bring things in. We'll see how Cardona does tonight. I think he looks substantially better already than he did at any point last year. Still pretty wild, but he's been able to work in some off-speed pitches, and he's kind of reined that fastball in a little bit instead of firing in at 96, 97 every time. So between the rotation of Robson and then the combo of Laborde, Tirado, and the combo of Cardona DeYoung rounded out by Gabriski and Graveman. These guys should be stellar as the season goes on. They're going to continue to grow.
I think you guys are in for a fun year in Lansing, not only on the field, but in the promotional calendar. This might be a question for Jesse as well, but last question I have for you guys is, let's talk about Hump Day. It sounds like the Camel has been a big success, and there might be some fans who don't know what I'm talking about, but we can't stop talking about it down here in Dunedin. So why don't you fill everybody in if they haven't heard already about Hump Day?
Well, we've only had one so far, and it seemed to be a success. It's definitely something that's unique, and it's garnered a lot of attention across the country. Jesse, you want to handle some of this Hump Day talk?
Well, it stars Humphrey the Camel. I think that's a pretty good way to start it. Is we have a live camel that comes on out to the ballpark wearing a Lugnuts baseball cap, a Lugnuts bandana. It delivers all the baseballs for the ceremonial first pitches, roams around in the concourse. It's got a designated area where it can relax. Fans can pose for pictures. Fans can win camel rides. It became a sensation. It's a camel at the ballpark.
Wait, you can fit a baseball hat on a camel's head? Is that what I just heard?
Yes, you did. Hey, one size fits all.
Wow, Lansing getting it done. Very nice, very nice. Well, yeah, guys, that's the questions I have for you so far. Jesse, I know you must have a thing or two to add about how the season's gone so far. Maybe aside from the top prospects we've been talking about, Chase DeYoung and the like, are there any guys who might have flown under the radar because of all the top guys in the prospect rankings that you're pretty excited about so far?
Trey, the guys that I'm wondering that we should talk at least a little bit about, let's begin with Dickie Joe Thon, who was a top prospect on the radar up until very recently, and then the Blue Jays started adding in all these other big-time prospects, and there's Thon batting right at the top of the order and getting on base every game.
Yeah, that's right. Dickie Joe Thon has been phenomenal to start the year. He took over for the leadoff spot from DJ Davis, who they've moved down to second. And DJ, I think, makes a solid number 2 hitter. Everybody thinks that he should be a leadoff guy, and we'll see how that pans out. But Dickie Joe Thon's been great as a leadoff hitter so far in the season. He's hitting .310, but like Jesse said, he's gotten on base all 7 games. He has a hit in all 7 games. He had a monster grand slam at Lake County. He showed off the power, and he's found a way to get on when he needs to. He came through with a clutch walk-off single a couple of nights ago in a game in the last series. So he's been, so far, I would say, the star, I guess, of this team, even with all of these big prospects. He's been the most consistent, coming out and getting the job done every single night.
Speaking of that walk-off single, here it was, bottom of the ninth, the Lugnuts and the Quad Cities River Bandits, the Houston Astros Farm Club, tied up 4-4.
Dickie Joe Thon out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, looking to be the hero tonight. The Lugs are 1-3 this year. The Bandits 2-2. Tie game, bottom of the ninth, the 0-1. Thon hits it softly, shallow right, in a hurry, it drops in between Elkins and Ramsey. In from third base, Derek Loveless, and the Lugnuts have walked off the River Bandits. Lansing wins on a little bloop RBI single by Dickie Joe Thon. Your final score from Lansing, Michigan, the Lansing Lugnuts 5, the Quad Cities River Bandits 4.
And that's the way that it's added with Thon, the hero. But Trey Wilson, one thing that's been fun is beyond the prospects, beyond the guys whom Tyler Murray and other folks have heard about, there's a game like last night where Jason Leblebigian and Justin Atkinson throw their hats in the ring defensively and offensively.
Yeah, that's right. We'll start with Jason Leblebigian. The defensive work that he did last night was absolutely amazing. Watching him get into the hole and get to a ball that got underneath Atkinson's glove at third and still be able to plant his feet and make a strong throw for a bang-bang out at first. And then a leaping catch that he made on a line drive that was going to be over just about everybody else's head. He's shown off an ability to be a very good athlete. This is the first that I've seen of Leblebigian so far to start this year. And defensively, I've been impressed with him. His bat's there. He's making contact. He's getting on base. He just hasn't had the hits come through yet. But he's going to. He's going to be a guy that hits And he's got the night off tonight, I believe. Yes, he does. But he'll be a guy that you can plug in anywhere defensively, and he's gonna save runs for you, which is the biggest thing. He's gonna stop some runs from coming across the plate. And also with Justin Atkinson, he's had a couple of games where he didn't do much offensively, but the last couple nights he was 3 for 4 last night with an RBI. He drove in a run. Atkinson has shown that he can certainly swing it, and if he starts to get into the lineup a little more consistently, he's starting tonight at first base as they've moved Matt Dean over to the DH spot tonight. Atkinson's a guy who can be a solid back into the order guy. Right tonight he's batting 6, but middle of the order to back into the order, get some hits, driving some runs if the situation comes up.
Trey Wilson. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, joined also by Tyler Murray. This is Around the Nest as we J-Talk our way with the Toronto Blue Jays minor league organization. Spoke with the AAA Buffalo Bisons, Wagner, the Double-A New Hampshire Fisher Cats, Tom Gauthier. Tyler's with the A-Adv Dunedin Blue Jays. Trey and I broadcast for the Lansing Lugnuts at Single-A. And Trey, our question of the podcast has been, what are you most looking forward to this year?
I think that's a pretty simple one. There's no one player for sure. This is a team that is as deep of a prospect generated team as I've ever seen, and I'm sure that it would be hard to find very many that can add up, at least in the Blue Jays organization. And with the prospect rankings, you never know how that's going to pan out. But I know the team that you guys had up here 2 years ago in 2012 was stacked with pitching. This year's got the pitching and the offense, and to see what some of these young guys, because a lot of these guys are young for this league, guys like DJ Davis and Mitch Ney, and even Matt Dean's right there right around the average age, right below the average age. This is a very young team with a lot of high ceiling guys, and to see how they grow over the course of a full season rather than just at 68 games like most of them had a year ago, I think that's going to be something very interesting to keep an eye on over the course of this season.
For me, after watching Emilio Guerrero break at the end of last year, and Daniel Norris as well, and now Tyler gets to see how Norris goes tonight and so far with Dunedin. How guys perform and how they are as players and prospects is not determined in April. It's great to see a player like, for example, in 2012, Justin Nicolino burst out of the blocks and already terrific. But I think what you and I are going to see this year here in Lansing is the players gradually figure things out, whatever that light bulb needs to be to flicker on. And when it does, this team could be special at the very end of the season, something to watch out for in the Midwest League, and with prospects to watch out for years down the line for the Blue Jays.
Jesse, one thing to add before I have to take off. Worth noting, congratulations last night. Derek Chung hit his first career home run, of course, as a professional baseball player, but it's the first time in an organized baseball game he remembers going deep. He made it a 6-0 Blue Jays lead last night, and he got mobbed after a brief silent treatment in the dugout. So I wanted to sneak that in there before we signed off.
Not quite as great. Santiago Nessi had his very first professional triple yesterday.
Very nice. What a big day.
It was terrific. Tyler Murray, thank you very much for joining us from Dunedin. Trey Wilson, thank you for joining us from Lansing.
Thanks, Jesse. See you, Tyler.
You got it. Can't wait to listen to you guys this year. Don't tell anyone, but I'm crossing my fingers for a rain out so I can tune into the Lugnuts pretty soon.
Kind man. He's Tyler Murray, the voice of the Peep, Trey Wilson, and Tyler. For Tom Gauthier in New Hampshire and Ben Wagner in Buffalo. And by the way, one quick shout-out to give. If you have not purchased the 2014 Toronto Blue Jays Minor League Handbook, it's available now as an e-book. It's been put out by Jared McDonald, by Jay Blue, by Charlie Caskey. Check it out, a handbook on the minor league system. This has been another round of Around the Nest. You can check back in with us next Friday from 5 o'clock to about 5:45, 6 o'clock, and you can also find this podcast via iTunes. The website is aroundthenest.mlblogs.com. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler, wishing you well, and until next week.